Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I'm Jordan. He's Brian. We're here today to finally do our 2025 NHL Draft preview. We've been combing through the scouting reports, the rumors, different sources, and right before recording, bit of breaking news for everybody. Brian said he figured out the draft. So I'm going to turn my microphone off for the next 47 minutes, and floor is all yours, Brian. Take it away.
So
Go Habs.
I did, in fact, figure out the draft in one specific way. How can Habs fans be excited and happy about this draft going in? Because usually there's a lot of anxiety, turmoil in one's mind of like, oh, man, what if they don't pick the guy I like? So two possibilities here. One of two things is going to happen, likely. They're going to trade up or they're going to make their picks. If they trade up, great. That means they like somebody enough to make another like Demidov, Hage style pick, somebody that they really love. And then what's the worst case scenario? They pick at 16 and 17. And here's what I figured out, Jordan, and all of this research, all the tape that I watched, everything else, like you said, combing through the draft reports, once again, elite prospects just being outstanding with the work that they did. So here's what I figured out. There are well over 17 players worth drafting in the exact middle of the first round. If the Habs make one or both picks, trade up, even trade down a couple spots, they'll get a worthy player. And here's the proof, Jordan. I'm going to go through a list of 21 players that I found that I would be happy with. Now, you can veto a few of these, but hopefully we end up with about 17. So there's the obvious. There's Matthew Schaefer, Michael Misa, Porter Martone, James Higgins, Jackson Smith, Caleb Desnoyers, Carter Bear, Radim Murtka, Justin Carbonneau, Jake O'Brien, even Brady Martin, Anton Frundell. I think that ends there of like, incredible. We're over the moon.
Sure.
Good so far? No vetoes?
Nope.
Like thrilled with any one of those guys. Then we go to Victor Eklund, Lyndon Lakovich, Braden Coots, Logan Hensler, Malcolm Spence, Roger McQueen, who I know you've got a lot on, Bill Zonin, Blake Fiddler, Max Seneca.
I have some question marks in there.
Okay, but you have more than 4 question marks? Because if there's only 4, we're getting one of those guys.
No, definitely not more than 4.
Great. So podcast over.
All right. Yeah, you can follow us on. No. So, okay. I mean, yeah, that's what I will say from this draft is it does feel like there's maybe a bit of a tier around, like 8 to 12 players. And then the pool opens up. But the good news is the Canadiens are so close to the top of that next tier. Not necessarily saying it's tier 1, tier 2. There's tiers 1 and 2. And then there's a drop. And then tier 3 is where the Habs are going to be picking.
That's right.
But it's towards the top of that tier. So it's almost like a brand new draft. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity. And of course, some of the people that we tend to believe might be in tier 2 will likely drop. And maybe there'll be opportunity there to go out and grab some players. So I wanted to maybe start this conversation before we get into the players. We all have our favorites and we're going to talk about them. Looking back on the first 3 drafts from the Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton era, Brian, is there anything we can learn by looking back at those drafts in terms of the players they've drafted, how they've utilized their draft picks, and how we can maybe project that forward into what type of players we're going to be talking about and highlighting? Because I know that certainly affected my approach in terms of who I spent just an extra little bit more on because it kind of fit with how I might view Hugo's approach.
Variety is one word I would use because in trying to find a through line, it's difficult because year to year there seemed to be trends. Yeah. But through the 3 years, there were not any decipherable trends. I mean, you may have found some, but off the top of my head, I can't really think of any. Like we know that 22 was incredible for both top end guys, like high upside guys like Lane Hudson, even Juraj Slafkovsky, who seems to be panning out pretty well. But then there's the high floor guys like Owen Beck. So even within one draft, like where's the through line there? You're getting quality players. That's the through line. And then last year we saw some overagers. We saw high compete level. And actually, you know what? When I think about it, maybe high compete level. That might be the right answer.
That is the closest thing to a right answer we can get. It's not ubiquitous. It's not across the board. Everyone fits this one mold, and you don't want it to because you can't put all your eggs in one basket of a singular draft philosophy. You're right where like 22, you can say, they bet a bit more on skill. If you're looking at the Mishar pick, the Roar pick, the Hudson pick, obviously. But then you have Slafkovsky and Beck, where you're like, well, translatability was all there on both those guys, and so far, so true. 2023, There's a bunch of overagers. They kind of bet on players who were also injured that year, and maybe they found some surplus value. And then last year, there's the skill picks in the first round with Demidov and Hage, but then Project and Atos Koivu, Project and Owen Protz, where it's like 4-year runway au minimum. You need to put in those guys. The one part that there's one other one, but I think it's more random. The one part that you kind of hit on there is like playoff projectability. So Slavkovsky's the poster child for this. I think Owen Beck fits this. Obviously, David Reinbacher fits this. Demidov, kind of, but not really. But the skill for him is so off the charts that he's allowed to be an exception to the rule. But Florian Jacki, Adam Engstrom, even someone like maybe like Tyler Thorpe, like you can kind of see that part weaved in. Again, not all of that holds true because Philip Michar was a pick, and that is not a pick that is necessarily, you view that type of play as like prototypical for postseason hockey.
Yeah.
The one that's like, I just think kind of weird, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, I'm sure Nick Bobrov has a big effect on this, is all 5 first-round picks that they've made in these first 3 years did not play their draft eligible season in the CHL. And if you extend it out further, of the 12 picks that they've made in the first 3 rounds in these 3 seasons, 3 drafts, only 2 played their draft eligible time in the CHL. That's Owen Beck and Vincent Rohr. Rohr eventually, of course, goes back over to Europe,
right?
But Michar kind of takes his place and plays in the CHL, so same. But 2 out of 12 from the CHL, none of the first round picks, which to me is like, I don't know how to treat that. It feels random, and maybe it's more of Hage is Canadian, but like did not play in the CHL. And there's a bunch of guys we're going to bring up that are like play in the WHL, play in the QMJHL. Of course, we're going to bring the Q up. I don't know if that's a pattern, but it's 3 years and it's 12 picks and there's barely any CHL guys.
I'd love to chalk that up to coincidence, and maybe that says more about the state of the CHL than it does about other things. We've talked before about how we're disappointed in the way that, especially at the junior level, Canada is not at the same level as the United States are. So, and then there's opportunities playing pro in Europe, so that's a whole other monster. But I wonder if that's more an indictment on the Canada juniors system rather than a philosophy that the Montreal Canadiens have close to the chest, you know?
It might be just an additional layer of trust in their European scouting.
Yeah, true.
To the point where they believe there's maybe a North American bias, and that's why Slavkovsky was taken over Shane Wright. That's why, I don't know if Ryan Bacher was taken, directly over someone like Zach Benson or Ryan Leonard, but because we viewed it as Michkov at the time, but that could be it. Demidov is, again, he's a no-brainer, but maybe there's something to that. But also Owen Beck's in there, and maybe he's the exception of the exception. I don't know. It's just something to keep in mind, and it's something to be very fun to track with the Canadiens having 7 picks in the first 3 rounds that we absolutely expect them to trade. I would say the over-under on that, Brian, is what, 1.5, 2? Like, for sure, they're moving at least one of those first 7 picks.
Oh, yeah. No question. Whether they defer one, whether they try and move up, move down, try and get a rostered player, I'd say 1.5, maybe 2.5 would be a funner, a more fun.
So point is, like, that sample size is going to get bigger, and maybe it'll just get blown out of the water this year because they'll make 5 picks out of 7 or 3 out of 5 that end up being CHL players. It's just something to say. If it's an obvious one, and none of the first rounders so far, CHL players. Okay, Brian, if you will allow me, I want to start this, ironically, I want to start the part of the player review almost by saying we're going to skip players for the first time. Last few years, Canadians been picking so close to the top of the draft. Bedard we didn't really need to talk about, but we did because it was fun. But we talked about Fantilli and Leo Carlsson and Michkov, and last season too, we knew Celebrini was off the board, but everybody else after that was fair game, including Demidov, of course. This year, because our lovely team made the postseason, they are such a step back from the elite of the elite. I've created a list of, I'm calling them unreachables, because I am fairly confident in at least these guys, and it's 4 players only, that we're basically saying they're 0% it is going to happen. And that is, of course, Matthew Schaefer, Michael Misa. I'm going to include James Higgins and Porter Martone in that list as well.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's the top 4 in terms of the draft order, but I am 1 and 2 I think we're all pretty confident in. Martone, as much as I love him, Ain't no way he's making it past like 6 or 7. Hagens, I know there's some Shane Wright vibes going on with James Hagens, where the expectations for him got so high before his draft eligible season that him having a pretty good draft eligible season was almost disappointing.
Yeah.
So he's there. I know you wanted to put Roger McQueen in this group, and we had a bit of a debate on it. And for the time being, he's not. He's not part of the unreachables. Is it just because you are ignoring the Caden Lindstrom aspect of this, of a guy who hurt his back and was injured almost the entirety of a season? And you're saying he's like 6'4", moves like a freight train, incredibly talented. If he was healthy, he might be the number 1 pick.
Yes. Short answer, yes. That's exactly right. No, but like power center who has phenomenal level of offensive ability. Do I have to go further? Like one team, all it takes is one team to go, we can rehab him. Oh, he was injured? Okay, yeah, we can figure that out. All it takes is one team, man. And like if we were picking 8th, okay, all right, here we go. Definitely not in the unreachable category. But the Rangers with the 12th pick, Detroit with the, actually not Detroit. Detroit's going to go safe like they do every year. But like Columbus with the 14th pick, like there's going to reach a point where we enter that third tier, as you said before, but McQueen is still there. This beacon of, oh my God, he might still end up being the best player in this draft. I think that's actually the way that Elite Prospects put it in their description of him. Like he might still end up being the best player despite these injuries. So all it takes is one team. That's the way I see it. Maybe I'm putting too little weight on the injuries.
I mean, I think it's maybe revisionist history with what happened with Caden Lindstrom this season, where they were saying the same thing this time last year. Oh, he's recovered. Look, he came back for the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then he basically didn't play hockey this year. He was still good enough to go 4th. You're going to say everything is great right now. They're not going to be like, yeah, you know what? Back, it's all messed up.
Right.
They're not saying that at the combine. I think specifically for McQueen, I'm not talking about him falling to 16. I'm talking about him getting to a point where it's feasible for the Canadiens to trade up for him. That's the category here. Like, I don't think Martone's going to fall enough for the Canadiens to be like, oh, we can put the package together now and get him.
If that, maybe I misunderstood you from the start. If that's the qualifier, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We don't have to have this discussion. Like I said, if we were picking at 8, 16, 17 plus a high-level prospect maybe gets you 8, or maybe a mid-level prospect. I don't know exactly what they would want in Seattle, but in the cards. I'm fully behind you there.
Okay, so despite me advocating to add Roger McQueen, what I think we're leading up to, and actually I do want to, before I get into my centers discussion, it's the annual statement about trading picks in the top 5 and the top 10. Brian, over the past 16 seasons, would you care to tell the listener how many draft picks within the top 5 after they have been established, like not a San Jose, Ottawa situation where you're trading it years in advance, but once the draft order has been set over the past 16 drafts, how many top 5 picks have been traded?
Same amount of Stanley Cup appearances the Toronto Maple Leafs have made in that same time period.
Or conference finals appearances for that matter.
Very
0.
True. Yeah.
It doesn't happen. Picks in the top 5 don't move. It is incredibly rare. The last time it happened was 2008, and that was 5 moving to 7, moving to 9. Like, there was barely any movement. Now, 6 to 10. It's not impossible, but it usually involves an established player. 2011, Columbus trades number 8 for a package including Jeff Carter. 2012, number 8, Jordan Staal. 2013, number 9, Corey Schneider. 7, the bit of the weird one, it's Antti Ranta and Derek Stepan. 2 guys, but then number 7. 21, it's Vancouver trades number 9 for Ekman Larsson. And of course, in 2022, Ottawa thought it was a good decision to trade the 7th pick for Alex DeBrincat, who asked for a trade 12 months later. That's it. That's the list. So it's 6 times in the past 16 drafts, a pick between 6 and 10 has been moved. It's not very likely. Now, weirdly enough, once you get to 11, it's open season. It happens all the time. So that's, again, gauge in terms of like, if you really don't think Caleb Desnoyers is going to make it out of the top 10, he's basically unreachable.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate conversation that we're leading into. But I always like to set the scene on that because top 5 picks don't get moved. 6 to 10, it happens. It's not impossible, but it involves an established player going somewhere. And if you're looking at the teams picking 6 to 10, because that's the other thing, you need a dancing partner. Philly doesn't feel like they're going to trade for an established guy.
No.
Boston, I have no idea what Boston's doing.
That's doubtful. They could get a big, powerful center. They're not moving that.
So that's the caveat, right? 8 Seattle, it feels like a slow growth.
Yeah.
Buffalo just laughing into eternity. And then Anaheim thinking Chris Kreider is the solution at number 10. So the point is, a lot of the teams in the 6 to 10 zone, I don't see them as like going for it, meaning they're not interested in an established player. I think it's going to be unlikely. And therein lies the issue, because you already mentioned it. The feeling for me right now is that as many as 7 centers are going to be drafted in the top 10. And this is a center-heavy draft. It is what people dream of. And it just feels like the Habs are going to miss out on those 7 guys.
Yep.
So Michael Misa, and I'll use the elite prospects consensus or consolidated rankings, not their own, because I do find there are still some biases, despite how amazing elite prospects are. There are some biases they still have. So just stretching it out to 15, 20, whatever the amalgam is. Michael Misa is ranked number 2. Hagens ranked number 3. Anton Frondel ranked number 5. Roger McQueen, we just talked about him, ranked number 6. Caleb Desnoyers ranked number 7. Jake O'Brien at 10. Brady Martin at 14. That's the 7 guys that I think can be in the top 10. Braden Coots ranked at 16 is kind of the oddball. Then there's a pretty huge chasm before you get to the rest of the centers.
Yeah.
You're talking like Jake Nesbitt, Cole McKinney, like they're in the 30s in the consolidated rankings. Brian, talk me off the edge here. Like, am I right or am I wrong that there might be a center run and the Canadiens will have almost no ability to get in on it?
You're dead on. I'd love to cheer you up and say that's not the case, but I think every high-level center. So, like, when I went through my list there of the 21 guys that I think, and you said, yeah, there's a few like question marks. None of the question marks were centers. Definitely. I failed to mention a few centers even that I didn't include, and we're probably not going to talk about just because they're undersized. And it seems as though, at least through the combine and what we've heard, and this could be a smokescreen, but what we've heard about who Habs management and scouts are talking to the most, they're all big dudes. They're all big dudes. They're looking for playoff performers. So those guys are out. And then, yeah, there's a big drop until that next tier. So I'd love to say, no, man, we're definitely going to get like a high-level center, but the highest level center that might be available at that point could be Bill Zonin, which he was on my list because I like him a lot, but he's not at the same level as these other guys. Anton Frondel is head and shoulders above Bill Zonin. You know, they could go 15 picks apart, and that would probably be pretty reasonable. So, yeah. Is that depressing? But you know what? No, I don't even want to ask that question. Is it depressing? Because there's other options. It's not all about centers. It's not all about centers.
Well, so unfortunately, we haven't shut up about getting a second line center for the past 6 months. And that's because we are very slow and we're loyal to Kirby Dach for as long as humanly possible. A lot of other people were saying a year and a half ago, we need another center.
Yeah.
And they drafted Michael Hage, and who knows? The more and more, like Caleb Desnoyers, like this is from the elite prospects description on him. And we all have the same thought. This is like the closing statement on Desnoyers' draft guide. Quote, more realistically, we see him settle on a second line playing a defensive puck retrieving and supportive role next to more dynamic puck carrying line mates and earning points through his positioning, passing game, and net front play. If that does not sound like the perfect guy to put next to Demidov, I don't know who is.
It's the exact perfect guy. Yes.
And he's ranked 7 on the consolidated rankings, and like he might not get past 3. No. Chicago might just be like, thank you very much. We're taking him, moving on.
So that run that you're talking about, I think Martone goes lower than Desnoyers, maybe not Jake O'Brien, but like definitely lower than they're saying Anton Frondel might be in like the top 4 or 5 even. So like Frondel, Desnoyers, screw it. Jake O'Brien I'm throwing in there. Like Porter Martone might drop beneath them just because he plays wing.
Right.
You know?
Because I can conceivably see, and maybe that's the Seattle spot. Because we were talking last week about, boy, Seattle just has a ton of centers. Porter Martone falling to them at number 8.
Best case scenario for them.
So that should be his floor, right? 8 would be Martone's floor.
Yeah, I think so. Boston, Philly, Nashville, not surprised if they just take best center available and say, we'll leave the high skill guy for the next team, but not slipping past the Kraken.
So this is the question I wrote down for you. So let's say, hypothetically, obviously Misa, Hagens, Frondel, Desnoyers, gone. Of course, Porter Martone's gone. let's put McQueen to the side again.
Sure.
And say the other centers are still around, and it's pick number 11. So O'Brien, Martin, even Coots you can throw in. And maybe having 3 of them available at number 11 kind of defeats the purpose. But are any of them you think worth packaging? We did the exercise last week where to get up to 10, the Canadiens would have to give up both second round picks for equal value, 16 and the 2 seconds, which are I think 41 and 49. Is one of Jake O'Brien, like, do you have a preferred one between O'Brien, Martin, Coots?
It's between O'Brien and Martin. Probably Martin. I like his meanness, but I'm totally fine with that. I would absolutely screw the second round picks. I want high upside this draft. Like this is our last kick of the can to have this many options, and I'd like them to use them in a highest ceiling available type of way. And I know that, O'Brien, Martin, they also have relatively high floors. They're not projects.
Yeah, so are they high ceiling enough to be worthy of trading? I mean, again, it's 2 seconds, like a big whoop, but like,
right.
Are they trade worth? Are they high? Yeah, they high. They have enough of a high ceiling because that's why I kind of put through McQueen out. Like those 3 guys. So O'Brien, we'll like do a quick overview of them for people who may have not looked at it. O'Brien, terrific passer, not much of a shooter.
Yeah.
Brady Martin. To me, Martin feels like a guy that's super fun to scout, but actually I would have like pretty decent doubts about his translatability to the NHL and him very quickly just profiling into a 4th line center.
Okay.
Coots is very much like the guy that we're not going to talk about that the Habs are actually going to draft, who is potentially also quietly a center, but we're not bringing him up yet. Loves the forecheck, lots of pace, very translatable. Unfortunately, Brady Coots is a tad undersized. And I don't know, like you said that the Habs management they're talking to the bigger guys. I don't know how much that, or maybe we can't have that discussion. Should that matter? This is an annual discussion. And, Lane Hudson just won the Calder Trophy as one of the shortest players in the league. So should it matter?
And if he and Caulfield played for a different team, I might sing a different tune. There's a limit to how many of those guys you can have. And look, if any of these guys turn into Caulfield or Hudson, like these smaller guys, that's a huge win. What are the odds of that? Not as likely as just like keeping those dudes. So I think you've already got a cupboard full of smaller forwards, smaller defensemen. Such is the Montreal Canadiens way. But adding to them now feels like a misstep. Now, and I do see the Jared Tenorti-ish fear of that statement of taking the big dude for the sake of taking the big dude. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying that if you see 2 guys with similar upsides and one of them happens to be 6'3" and the other happens to be 5'10", play the same position, am I crazy to say you go with the bigger dude? If the line is that close between the 2 of them, and maybe I'm oversimplifying.
Listen, but that's first of all, Jared Tenorti did end up having a huge impact in the Montreal Canadiens franchise. It was just as an opponent when he hits Kirby Dach that eventually tears his ACL.
Yeah.
So he did have an impact as a Canadiens draft pick, just in the worst way possible.
Yes.
Look, I mean, size, you can't teach size. That's what you hear 1,000 times a day at this time of year. We're going to get into the defensemen. Like Radim Murtka is one of those guys where you're like, there's nothing overly impressive about his game except that he's a freaking giant. And that might make him the 10th pick in the draft.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, he's in my trade up category. I had a 5th guy in mind, and it ended up not being Roger McQueen. I had Jackson Smith there as won't see him, can't trade for him. Those were my because Jackson Smith just looks like a number 1 defenseman in waiting who's gonna win a Norris one day. But to go down the list a little bit to Murtka, that's my guy. That's the guy that if he's sitting there at 12, you do whatever the hell you can to move up a few spots.
Yeah.
Which might surprise you because you're right. No singular, incredibly exciting detail to his game, but just so well-rounded that development might be a breeze, and he's also a giant who will be extremely punishing in the playoffs. And he's got decently high compete. So, like, I think that's right up our alley.
Yeah. And we all buried the lead, too. He's a righty.
Yes. Similarly, we only talked about 3 right-handed centers because after the top few incredible ones, the ones that won't be there, it's all righties. There's like 4 incredible left-handed centers. 1, 2, 3, All right, 3 incredible left-handed centers, and they're all going to be long gone. 4. Frondel. I was right. They're all going to be long gone. Long gone. Desnoyers, Hagens, Misa, obviously, and Frondel. Top 8?
Yeah.
At best?
So, yeah, I think so at this point. Look, I think a month ago, best case scenario for these picks was trading up for Desnoyers and sticking at 17 to get Carbonneau.
Oh
I think
God.
that was like the wet dream of all. And there's not even some irony in there in the To Be Québécois, but like just from a fit standpoint,
yes,
and like a projectability standpoint.
Well, that's what's lovely about Carbonneau is that if his name was I don't know, Daltrey Digson from the deep south of the United States, he'd be just as exciting. It has nothing to do with him being a Québécois playing in the Q. Like that has nothing to do with it. It's who he is as a player and what he does on the ice.
So circling back to the other 3 centers and kind of that group of 8.
Yeah.
My feeling is I don't know if any of those 3 are worth trading up for. That I would rather just sit at 16 and 17 and have like exploit the market inefficiency that will be wingers that should be in the top 10 or some defensemen. Someone's going to fall. If all these centers, if all 8 of those guys go in the top 11, let's say, which is completely in play.
Yep.
That means some really good wingers and defensemen are going to be sitting at 16 and 17.
Yep.
And I think in my amateur interpretation of some of these players, I don't think O'Brien, Martin, Coots, like at 16 and 17, yeah, backflips. Let's do it.
Exactly.
But I don't know if they're worth, or if the Habs were sitting at, if their pick was 10th or 11th. Terrific. Phenomenal options. I don't know if it's worth punting a couple picks to get those guys, or even merging 16 and 17 to get to 9. Like I didn't do that exercise, but I would presume you would need to get to like both of those guys to get to 8 or 9.
So can I jump on that right quick? Merging the 2 to jump to 8, 9. I hate that idea. I've heard that thrown around all over the place. And I just don't think the difference between the guy you would get there versus either guy you'd get at 16, 17 is large enough to go from, okay, whatever, 1 A+ level prospect versus 2 A level prospects. I don't think that's worth it.
So I agree with this. And like, I want to bring up something Arpon Bass been saying a lot. And I think it's been a bit narrow-minded, but there's some validity to what he's saying of like, the idea of the Canadiens trading their picks when Columbus, who says they're willing to trade their pick, also has number 20. When Vancouver has basically said, we don't want to make a draft pick. Take our number 15 pick.
So they're right above us.
The value of 16 and 17 go down. Now, the part of the discussion that hasn't been brought up is, well, that doesn't mean the same packages are going to be offered. It doesn't mean those teams can offer the same players as part of that trade. So I do think there is opportunity for the Canadiens to merge 16-17 with something else maybe. And that's enough icing on the cake to get Buffalo to commit and give up number 9. But as we've said, like it would take someone very elite. Like Martone at 8, again, if he somehow passed Seattle, you tell Buffalo, like, how can we do this?
Yeah.
How can we figure this out? I don't know if those other centers, I know Martone's the winger, but I don't know if the other centers outside of those first 5 for me would do it.
Well, maybe the way to do it with Buffalo, too, is to be like, hey, you got a lot of high-skill guys who we would love to have that don't want to be there. We could take them off your hands. Like, maybe we sweeten the pot that way, you know?
Yeah, just offer them Yoel Armia's expiring.
Yeah, exactly.
Just his rights.
Exactly.
That'll work. That's definitely going to be realistic.
No, but look, I think you're right. Caleb Desnoyers is sitting there at 9. You do it. But he won't be.
No.
You know, Anton Frondel sitting there at 9. You do it. But he won't be. Carter Bear sitting there at 9.
Okay, let's freaking do it.
I know. Jordan.
Let's do it.
Listeners, Jordan has been waiting to talk about Carter Bear. I don't know, since we were in high school. He just didn't know it yet.
Yeah, it's been at least a month and a half. Listen, there could not be a more perfect Montreal Canadien for what Kent Hughes wants to build, for what Martin St. Louis wants to coach, for who wants to fit into the top 6. He is like just perfect translatability in terms of like, he is going to murder you on the forecheck. He has pretty good skill. I enjoy the heck out of his shot. He has just enough size. I forget the exact measurements. I think he might be just 6 foot, like 180. And the effort that he gives every single shift. And this isn't like, I think he's been the one at times I've seen compared to like a slightly bigger Gallagher. And like it brings me back to like the discussions we had about Ryan Leonard a couple years ago. And I think Bear is right along those lines. Like his elite prospects consolidated ranking is 12. And with the way all the centers are flying up the charts, he, I think, is going to be sitting there when we get to the early teens. And again, I don't know if you want to get the 14 and you have to flip one of the seconds, maybe that's enough to do it. I think he is so freaking good. He is incredibly well-rounded. And the sneaky part is that he played some center last year. And because of how translatable his game is and how he knows how to forecheck and how he knows when he's F1 and how he knows when he has to back check, he can be a center. If the Habs say, we want you to be a center in D+1, I'm going to presume Everett, the team he plays for in the WHL, would have no issues with that.
Right.
And he'd be able to get a season in at center. So there's a backdoor center option here. Now, we can't say that too loud because then other people are going to figure it out.
Yeah.
But for me, he's the guy. He is the guy. If he's at 16, you will hear me running around my street.
Yeah.
Because that's best case scenario at this point.
Wow.
What do you think of him?
I think he's phenomenal. The one thing I would add is he's excellent defensively as well. Mm-hmm. So that center thing, that's often the thing that wingers can't figure out when going to center is that, oh, shit, I got to get back. I got to be there. And I got to be responsible and well-positioned. So absolutely. He's also a brilliant playmaker. So moving him to the center just gives him that many more options as a playmaker. You know, the same way that if Demidov played in the middle of the ice, he'd have probably all four players to pass to rather than two or three, depending. Like he might just be in the corner and not have access to a guy. So like you give a brilliant playmaker more options, who also is very good defensively, who works harder than anybody else. Like Gallagher, excellent comparable because neither of them ever quit. Ever. Carter Bear never quits. And so I'm completely talk about burying the lead, starting our Carter Bear conversation like 33 minutes in, because yes, he could drop and that would be insanity. And the Habs better pick him at 16, not 17 to make a point.
I think he's when we were talking about the any patterns and what Hugo have done in their drafts, the one that's come back more and more often is playoff translatability, postseason player. Carter Bear is that guy in spades. And yeah, I do think that like backdoor center option is fully there. And I'm sure the Habs are aware of that. And that would be just a really good, and it's not like you're putting all your eggs in the basket of like, well, he better become a center, a la Alex Galchenyuk, right? Where we forced Galchenyuk to be a center so bad, and they just messed them up with Terrien and Bergevin. That, anyways, don't have to get into that. Whereas with Bear, I feel like the conversation could be, we want you to try to be a center for D+1. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we're going to get you back to the wing. We view you as either right now, and there is no like failure if you're not a center. You're just going to be an awesome top six winger.
Yeah. Who
scores 25 goals in the regular season, and then you have a postseason where he has, 9 goals in 17 games or something. He's going to be one of those guys for sure.
Yeah. So are we crazy after this just glowing, I don't even know what to call it, but it really feels like we both just love him almost more than anybody else in that range. Is it foolish to think he would drop to 16, 17? Like there is the center thing. There's the fact that there's a few right-handed defensemen that are extremely sought after. Like I think Mertka goes above him, despite the fact that I think Carter Bear eventually could become the better, probably will become the better player. I was going to say could, but probably will. Is it foolish? Are we having a pipe dream here?
No, I really don't think so. Because I think the center thing is real, especially the more you see the mock drafts and people who are connected having just this run of like Frundell, Desnoyers, McQueen, obviously like Misa going before them, Hagen's going to like 7th or something. Like you can see a real universe where other than Schaefer, by the time you get to 8, it's like, wait, Porter Martone's still available, and then Martone's at 8. And then what about Victor Eklund? Like, I'm sure we're going to get into him in a couple minutes, but there's a real possibility of also Mertka getting in there if someone's really high on Jackson Smith, which I think there's a discussion for us to have. Like we've parked the left-handed defenseman for so many years now. Should we kind of reopen that door of say, hey, it wouldn't be that bad idea to draft an 18-year-old lefty?
So Jackson Smith, we won't see him. I said it before, won't see him, can't trade for him. Kashawn Atchison, he's the guy that could and probably will be there. If that's the case, though, I think there are more interesting options. Like I'd go Logan Hensler, in part because he's right-handed.
So Okay, so let's do Hensler then. I know we're jumping around a bit, but that's just kind of how the discussion is, especially when you're in the middle of the draft. Hensler, first of all, Hensler and Blake Fiddler were two guys. Two righties, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
And Elite Prospect described both of those guys as toolsy, which I read that as hockey speak for he's not that skilled, but he works hard. He's like, oh, he's a toolsy player.
Okay.
It just means he has no offense, but he can do a bunch of random stuff.
I don't know. I read that differently. I read that more as like, maybe it's similar, but he's not going to impress you over the moon, but he does all the little things right.
Yeah, he can't score.
Yeah, maybe I just said the same thing you did in different words, but
I think you did. So listen, Hensler, very smooth skater. I think at times at Wisconsin, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And I was just watching one of his games recently, and he's very like, I didn't even notice him on the ice. And maybe that's a good thing. They have a right-handed defenseman that you don't see him much.
That's right.
But also at the same time, like, there's still mistakes. There are still things I worry about. A lot of he's super projectable, but I think at 16 and 17, sure, I don't trade up for him, but I think at 16 and 17, it's a defensible pick, not necessarily an exciting one though.
Spot on. If he's the second pick after a really high upside thing, I'm good with that. I said before, like go incredibly high upside on both these picks if you possibly can. Barring that, and they want to go safe with one of them to make sure they at least get one. Like you have two middle of the first round picks and neither one of them pans out. That's not good. So maybe you go with a guy like Hensler, who chances are is going to pan out. Like at worst, what is he? A third pair right-handed defenseman. Still very high value there.
Mm-hmm. So question then for you, do they need to split the two picks? And I mean that both positionally, and we can just say wingers. We don't have to say left wing or right wing, but like, do they need to split the two picks between either positionally or from an upside perspective? Or you can just say, screw it. We can just take two of the exact same type. Like, should it matter?
No, I don't think it should. I think a BPA, man, best player available. Whoever they deem that is, and their definition is going to be different than everybody else's because everyone's different. But through these three drafts, I have more faith in them than almost anybody. So whoever they deem is right, they'll go with. And if that means two centers that we had lower down, wow, okay, they must believe in these guys. If it means two right-handed defensemen, have at it, man. If it means two wingers or two defense, like I have so much faith in them. Whatever they do, I think is fine. And also, I will say this: if they take two of the same player who are fighting for the same spot, innate competition between the two of them, which I think could just propel them up. Like they're going to be battling, even if they're not on the they might not both be on the Laval Rocket at the same time. Let's say two different leagues. They're probably going to be checking each other's stats. Like, oh, is he closer to the show than I am? All right, I got to step it up.
So let's dive into the wingers a bit more now. We obviously talked about I gushed over Carter Bear. Rank these four players for me, Brian, because I think this is the holy smokes, it's number 12 and all four of these guys are available. Obviously Carter Bear, Justin Carbonneau, Lidin Lakovic, or Lakovic, I've heard both pronunciations, and then Victor Eklund. All four are available. Habs picking at 16. What do you do?
All four available? It's Bear and Carbonneau with a bullet. The difference between Eklund and Lakovic, I think I'd put Eklund slightly above. But to me, the difference between Bear and Carbonneau and then those other guys is larger. And I know Eklund seems to be between them in a lot of draft rankings. I don't know that I agree in the same way. Could be biased, but I think Bear and Carbonneau those are my picks.
So consolidated rankings again, just for some context: Bear is 12, Carbonneau 17, Eklund 8, Lakovic 15. So
yeah.
And there's some volatility there between who you're looking at. I've seen Carbonneau edges of the top 10, seen him in the 20s. Eklund, I think they're quite high on him on the Athletic, but a little bit lower on him, and I forget if it's Dober prospects or what. And then Lakovic is just kind of all over the place. And that's an interesting guy to talk about. I think my answer is the same, by the way. I think it is. Give me Carter Bear on the left side. Give me Justin Carbonneau on the right side. We just won't have centers.
It's fine.
Well, we're just going to have a line. I mean, again, Bear might just be a center.
We've seen Nick Suzuki play way too much. Maybe he could just play two lines.
Yeah. How much skill can we give Jake Evans is the question.
So, okay, that's a phenomenal question, Jordan. What would it take to make Jake Evans into a top 6 center in terms of wingers? I think you're getting close with those two guys plus Demidov at times.
Yeah.
Never going to happen, but haha.
I do think my pick would be Bear and Carbonneau, but on Lakovic, skating is kind of whatever. He is 6'4" now and just kind of kept growing. But he has that thing where, well, it's interesting. In some sports, like in basketball, when guys are like grow really fast and suddenly play different positions, they develop skills as a smaller player, which is usually ball control. And that translates really well when they become 6'10" and 6'11". And that's a huge inherent advantage. We saw it last year with Seneca, right? Where Seneca suddenly went from like 5'10" to 6'3" in a season.
Yeah.
And he was really able to use the speed he developed, the hustle he developed, the skills he developed. And those translated so quickly. Whereas with Lakovic, what you're seeing is the size is there now. He's unable to use any physicality. It's something that I'm sure he's very cognizant of nowadays, but he doesn't drive to the net. He doesn't engage in contact. And can that be taught? I think so. Like, I don't think that's a terrible pick in the middle of the first round, but there would be some concern there. And then Eklund, the worry is there's no actual elite skill.
That's right.
Crazy forechecker, bit undersized, but he played in a men's league all season and he took no prisoners.
Yeah.
And it's like the same way we looked at Hudson and be like, he's never going to bowl someone over, but no one's ever going to just destroy him and like rock him into the boards. And I would say like Eklund on the forecheck, he actually initiates a lot of the contact, and I think he's a smart player. But again, this one too, kind of bearing the lead. We haven't talked about Justin Carbonneau yet, which asked me 4 weeks ago. That was probably the guy after Bear,
right? That
I was like, he is like his release. It's so well disguised to the point where you don't even know he shot the puck and it's already in the net. Like the flex sometimes on his wrist is so freaking subtle.
Yeah.
That you don't even know that he's already shot the puck.
It's not just sorry to cut you off, man, but it's not just the shot either. He disguises everything. You literally don't know if he's about to DQ, make a pass, take a shot, or have a sip of water. Like those look identical. The lead up to those is all identical.
I completely agree. Look, he has the same stuff that you would expect almost any Q player to have, where you're like, he doesn't really know what defense is. Right. That's the QMJHL these days. And I will say, like, it's not like his defense is abhorrent. It's average at best, it's and fine. He does tend to disengage a bit on defense, and it is what it is.
If with him is the only thing keeping him from being an obvious top 10 pick, the fact that he'll make mistakes by trying to do too much. Is that the only thing?
That's right where I was going.
Okay. So, because that's all I see as a problem, quote unquote problem. Because time and time again, you see 18-year-old kids have that problem, get drafted low, and then suddenly, oh, wait, that could be coached out of them? Yeah, of course it can. It's not that hard to tell them, look, you're not alone on the ice anymore. You're in the show now. There's 32 teams worth of players like you.
Yeah.
So play as a team.
And that's where the translatable skills, his shot's still going to be his shot. His skating's still going to be there. And all of a sudden you're realizing I can trust the guys I pass to a lot more than I trust right now.
Yeah.
And that's probably something that a lot of these guys, like some of them are wizards, right? Like I think we mentioned him briefly, like Jake O'Brien, like just a wizard with passing, like opens up, a la Demidov really, like opens up lanes that don't already exist. So some guys, it comes to them naturally, the playmaking. Other guys like Carbonneau, it takes a bit of forcing, and maybe it's that increase in talent around him that kind of opens up the doors. So those are the realistic wingers. There's others we could get into if you wanted to. Malcolm Spence is a name that I've seen thrown around here and there. I don't love it, but it's, again, I feel like I still would prefer at that point in the draft a bit more high-end skill than what Spence can offer. Anyone else we haven't gone into? Like we brushed quickly over some of the defensemen. We talked about Murka and Hensler. Some of the lefties too. Again, like, is there an inefficiency here where, like, I don't know if Atchison is great value at 16 or 17. That feels about appropriate.
Yeah.
Whereas Jackson Smith is certainly like, what the F is going on? Why is he available at 11 or 12? Just broadly, in terms of the defensemen, or even maybe some other wingers I missed out on, is there anyone else that we're seeing that we think are actually, they should be valued a bit higher, but because of how we're kind of anticipating this draft going, it'll be 14 and we're going to start, crossing our fingers, and everyone's going to start doing their secret prayers to make sure they fall to 16.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm looking for some, but I'm seeing a lot of Aitchison, Spence, and Zonin style players that, yeah, okay, cool, we got them. Not over the moon, though. Not over the moon. And that's why I started this whole entire episode with my list where I stopped after like the first 12. I stopped after like the first 12 where I said, those are the guys that you'd be over the moon for. And now you can veto me for the rest, because the rest of them, there are a lot of guys sort of beneath that. Maybe as a not exciting pick, but just, thrilled to have him because of positioning, Blake Fiddler. I think we meant to talk about him in the same sort of conversation as Murtka before, but didn't. Again, not incredibly exciting. They also, another guy that they described as toolsy. So,
Yep, he's the toolsy one. What I will say, I do see more offensive upside in Fiddler than I do Hensler.
Yes, definitively.
If that's a slight differentiation. Now, consolidated rankings would disagree with that. They have Hensler at 18, Fiddler at 28, so inherently a bit more risk with Fiddler. But I think, to me, those guys are a coin flip. And that might be faulty in just the little bit that I've seen from both of them. Again, Murka's 6'6", so that probably separates him a bit, even though I find there's nothing overly exceptional about what he does. But Hensler and Fiddler, to me, it's a coin flip, personally.
I really like Fiddler's skating. I think everybody does. And then he can be very deceptive at times, which is a lot of fun. Beyond that, the physicality is quite good. He's a big dude too. He's 6'4", close to 210. So he's already fairly filled out. And I think that might be another kind of stopping point here, is that sometimes you look at a 6'4" guy and he's like 180 and you're like, oh, he's going to fill out and be even more physical. Fiddler, his physical development is pretty close to over. Barring something crazy. He might gain another 5-10%, but that might be it. So I don't know how exciting that is. You prompted this discussion with is there another exciting one? And I gave you, a good skater with fun deception and decent playmaking, and a fairly good shutdown guy too. Let's give him that.
Yeah, I mean, also at this point, now, if we're starting to dive in a bit more on the guys, probably more ranked in the 20s, at least by popular consensus ranked in the 20s, you're conceding either offensive upside, size, or effort. There's a reason you're going a little bit further down the list now.
Yeah.
Same goes for someone like Cullen Porter. We didn't bring up Cullen Potter. We didn't bring him up earlier when I did the ranking of the 4 wingers, even though you could conceivably say, well, he should probably belong in this list. And I think he has a great shot, good playmaking, great skater, but he's 5'10". And is that narrow-minded? Probably. Yeah. I think the Canadiens have kind of packed themselves into a bit of a corner here, because you make exceptions. Maybe we can start closing with this. When it comes to certain player archetypes, you make exceptions for the unicorns, right? You want your forwards to be basically 6 foot. You want your defenseman to basically be 6'2", all intents and purposes. You make exceptions for the unicorns because they are completely different than what you're expecting. That's why Cole Caulfield is on this team. He is 5'7", 5'8". That's why Lane Hutson's on this team. Those are the Canadiens already have 2 unicorns in terms of guys who are way smaller than what you would expect out of what they produce and how important they are. Lane Hutson was the 2nd best player on the team. He won the Calder Trophy. Cole Caulfield is the 3rd best player on this team. Led them in goals, almost scored 40. They already have 2 guys who defeated the odds. I don't know how many more of them you can have. So yes, it's definitely narrow-minded to say that guy's 5'10". I don't think the Canadiens should draft him. But with the way they've built themselves, especially for the long term, Caulfield and Hudson aren't going anywhere. So I did find myself, same goes with Ben Kindle, just off the list. I did not look too deeply at these guys because it's just there's Cameron Reed, another one, not enough.
Well, enough height. Here's the perfect example: Cameron Schmidt, 5'7".
Yeah,
unbelievable skater, unbelievable shooter, 5'7".
Yeah, so
he'll go lower than he should.
To wrap.
So hang on, actually, before you wrap, one last guy, the only position we haven't talked about, and usually we don't get to in the first round. Joshua Ravensbergen.
So can I reframe it? Who takes him? It ain't the Habs.
Oh, fascinating. I like that question. No, it ain't the Habs. It's lower down.
Can I provide some options?
I'm looking at the list now, but go ahead. Yeah, I might want some coaxing.
Ottawa?
So that was one that I was thinking of. 21. It might still be a little high.
It is. It might be.
Like the era of picking a price is over, despite
Clearly.
the fact that Ravensburg, and maybe he's not going to be priced, but I don't think he'll be far away if he pans out.
What about Washington at 27?
That seems right. I was looking at the Blackhawks too at 25. Franchise goaltender. You get him in this draft, and they have 3 picks in this draft. They have number 3, and then they've got just 2 in the first round. So yeah, maybe they get the best guy they can at 3. Are so thrilled about that, and they go, we gotta figure out the net now.
So I think his spot's comfortably in the 20s at this point. I'm not sure there's a team. I mean, certainly not in the top 10. Again, with all the centers,
no,
it won't even be a discussion. Trying to see if there's someone in the teens that would be interested in. I mean, obviously not the Canadiens or Calgary, Vancouver, but Vancouver's trying to win, and I think they're okay with Demko still. And I know goalies need 5 years to get ready, but
they're also getting rid of that pick. So
in the 20s, he goes in the 20s. Yeah. I'll go with Washington with my guess.
Okay, I like that. I'm gonna go Blackhawks. You go Chicago.
Fair enough.
We'll see.
Wrapping it up on the Canadiens aspect of it, we're gonna do an episode next week. We're gonna have a bit more time to think about all the picks, and that is when we'll make our actual predictions on what they actually do. But for now, Brian, best case scenario, worst case scenario, go. And this could include trades too, if you want it to be.
Best case scenario is Jeff Gorton has some inside dirt on Mathieu Darche that he doesn't want getting out, and ends up getting the first overall pick from him. No. Okay, for real. Somehow trade up one of the picks and not the other in order to get one of the incredible left-handed centers. I don't care if it's... I mean, I would rather Desnoyers than Frondel, but either way, I'm very happy. And then with the other pick, Bear. Other pick, Bear.
Okay. So a Desnoyers trade into 6, let's say, if we want to stay in some type of reality.
So 8 is the one that people are talking about that the Kraken are willing to move. In fact, 4 is actually the one that people are really talking about that Utah is going to move. But guess what they're asking for? Which I should have brought this up earlier before you said let's wrap. But sorry, I do want to talk about it very quickly. Like, they want a ready, young, top-end forward. That is Cole Caulfield. That is Juraj Slafkovsky. That is Ivan Demidov. End of conversation. Not happening.
I'm not sure the 4th pick in the draft has that much value.
Well, so
I don't think. I think like if you one versus the other, Cole Caulfield versus the 4th pick. This is a ridiculous conversation. But like 4 is not enough for Cole Caulfield. I'm sorry.
Really, that's fascinating. I don't know, man.
Well, we know who the players are, right? So you're telling me Caleb Desnoyers is more valuable than Cole Caulfield?
No, I'm saying James Higgins is. Desnoyers, maybe not. Probably not. Higgins.
So again, 16 years since the last time a pick in the top 5 has moved.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not going to happen, but just value-wise, It's a fun discussion.
The exception here might be new ownership group, new ownership syndrome. They want to make a splash. They want to do something. They want to be good right away. They're now actually a team called the Mammoth.
Sick, by the way.
So that could be an exception. But if the desire is, an established star, basically, then like go trade for Jason Robertson.
Yeah, that's an easier move to make. That's true.
That seems like a win-win. 8, Seattle. The dream of Porter Martone lives if the Canadiens can get up to 8, but I don't know if 16 and 17 would do it for me, especially as we've kind of talked about. There's a bit of a drop once you get to like 11, 12, and it's kind of like, we hope some of the good guys are left.
Yeah.
That would be the other one where it's like, yeah. Anyway, so your somewhat realistic is the Canadiens trade into the back half of the top 10. Caleb Desnoyers somehow, because Chicago loved Roger McQueen and Porter Martone impressed in Utah.
I did say it could be Frondel too. It could be Frondel.
It could be Frondel. Yeah. I mean, Frondel might be gone at 4. Like, it's very realistic. It's Desnoyers, Frondel, 3-4.
Yeah.
And then Bear falls to the Habs at 17. I've kind of said it. Like, I think the similar scenario. It's Bear and Carbonneau, 16 and 17. And you run out like bandits, being like, oh my God, we just got 2 top 6 wingers. And we are going to continue to try to figure out the center thing. But for now, like, we're very, very happy because we think we got some killers. Let's flip it. What's the worst case scenario? So I see you're struggling. Yeah. Let's try to workshop this one. So the centers are gone.
Yeah.
Unable to trade up.
Yeah.
Bear is gone. Carbonneau goes.
Yeah.
You're now staring down a bunch of defensemen. Let's say Merca's also gone.
Okay.
You're now looking at the safer defensemen, and Lakovic, Eklund's also gone, and you've kind of settled into that you've fallen out of your tier almost.
Right.
And you're at that point where you're saying like, I'd rather just trade away the 17th pick at this point, you know? And that's a tough spot to be in because the Canadiens, we haven't talked about it, they've made draft day-ish trades to get established NHLers, or like people call them reclamation projects. I would fight that on the Alex Newhook front. That was definitely not a reclamation project.
No, not at all.
But they have traded first-round picks on and around draft day for established players. So it's not out of the question. The problem is if you're waiting till that moment where you're saying it's not really hitting for me, then I think I don't even know if worst case is the best way to look at it. If the Canadiens take, say, a Logan Hensler and then trade out of 17 and kind of kick the can down the road a little bit more when it feels like we're in the part where it's like we need to get going. We need to start pushing in. And the fact that like instead of the Canadiens getting an established player, like that's plan A is get an established guy with these picks.
Okay.
That's what we've talked about last couple of weeks. Plan B, which we're finding is going to be more likely, is get the guys now. Yeah. Get the guys you trust, you think are really good, and you think you might be able to get some extra value. The worst option is we don't necessarily get the guys we wanted or preferred, and we actually have to kick the can down the road to a 26 prospect or a 27 prospect because that's the trade that was available or whatever.
Right.
And that might be the worst case scenario.
So I agree with you. That is the worst case scenario. I don't think it's likely. I think they'll find another guy they like enough. And B, that's not a terrible worst case scenario. That's why I was struggling so much at the beginning of this, because I railed off the 21 guys that I'd be happy with there. Logan Hensler far from the bottom of that list. And if he's the only guy they draft, sure, that's disappointing when you compare it to the fact that we were all excited about getting Carbonneau or Bear or Jake O'Brien or Anton Frundell, like Lakovic. Lakovic might be in the same conversation as Hensler, but yeah, it's disappointing to only get one, not two, but it depends what you get back. I think that's the key here, is it depends what you get back. And even if it's kicking the can down the road, teams falter, and maybe that team that thought they were in a surefire playoff position next year ends up getting us a top 10 pick, maybe a 13 in a stronger draft. Which I'll also say I don't see that likely because teams are going to be wary about trading away next year's draft picks.
All draft picks next year are going to be protected like top 5, top 7.
For sure.
I'm just letting people know that right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be playoff teams at the deadline are going to be willing to move their picks. Beyond that, no one's moving picks with Gavin McKenna on the horizon. Yeah, like there's a very real scenario where like, I mean, I get at Keyshawn Atchison's like an exciting player, but I don't know how much of a needle mover really that pick would be along with Logan Hensler.
I agree with that. And I have heard rumors they're very interested in Atchison.
I mean, we're all interested in him. I'm just not sure it's worth a middle of the first round pick. That's all I'm saying. He is going to be so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
And I have some fears with who might end up drafting him. And I'm worried that it's Ottawa at 21. But because it's just, he would immediately become like, I got to hate this guy now. Those are the rules. But we'll see. Anyways, I think we can wrap there. We'll be back next week to kind of, I think, further refine our takes on the draft, but also talk a bit more because we are exiting, Brian. I don't know if you know this. We are exiting clickbait season. It's just about over. You're going to turn over the calendar tomorrow. It's going to be so end of season. And we are entering smokescreen season.
Yes.
Which is when all the rumors now just become fake.
Yes.
And just completely made up. And the point is misdirection.
And insiders are outsiders and nothing matters. And I love it.
And we will be here to read the tea leaves and say, all of this is bullshit.
Opposite of bullshit. Congratulations. Holy, how did we not mention this before? Oh yeah, because we knew it was going to happen for months. Congratulations, Lane Hudson, on your Rookie of the Year victory. Excellent work, Calder. And then 9th in Norris voting.
Yeah,
he's 20.
Shocking,
Jordan. He's 20 years old. Our cup runneth over.
Shocking. What was not shocking was, as predicted on this podcast right here, was Nick Suzuki finishing top 5 in Lady Byng voting.
Yes, true.
I was a little off on the Selke. I said top 10, 13th. Oh, well. But, hey, it's clearly on the way there. There's a lot of stuff in the cupboard, and it's just going to get better and better. Okay, we'll wrap now. You can follow us on social media at HabslandPod on Blue Sky and TikTok. If you like what you heard, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'll be back next week to keep talking Habs as we get closer and closer to the 2025 NHL Draft. Until next Monday, go Habs.